Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Tropical update number 35 on Tropical Depression Fred, Tropical Storm Grace, and Tropical Storm ahn-REE. Yes, that's how you pronounce it. It's not Henri, it's ahn-REE. And ahn-REE is located just south of Bermuda at the moment, where a tropical storm watch is in effect. It'll be making its way around Bermuda over the next 5 days, as it already has for the past couple. Tropical Storm Grace is located over Jamaica at the moment, where tropical storm warnings are in effect there, the Cayman Islands, and the southeastern part of Cuba. Tropical storm watch is in effect for the southwestern part of Cuba and Haiti, as well as a hurricane watch for portions of the Yucatan Peninsula. We're going to be watching Grace very closely. Fred no longer has a cone, as now it's inland and expected to dissipate over the next few days. So let's get started with Fred. Fred clearly looking like a post-tropical cyclone at this point in time. Clearly a decaying low-pressure system, but nonetheless, it remains a tropical depression for now. Not sure how much longer that's necessarily going to last, though. Winds are 30 miles an hour, pressure down to 1,007. Tornado watch in effect for portions of the Carolinas and Georgia due to the storm, as well as a flood watch for a large area in lower Appalachia. So we'll continue to watch Fred. We'll have another advisory from the Weather Prediction Center at 5 p.m. as the National Hurricane Center has handed over responsibility to them, as it's an inland threat to the United States. Tropical Depression Fred is going to cause 4 to 8 inches, isolated 10 for Georgia in the same area where where those flood watches are in effect, obviously. 2 to 4 isolated 6 for the central Appalachian portions of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, all the way up to upstate New York. Tornadoes also a threat, as we can see Georgia up into Virginia, 5% chance of tornadoes today. 2% from Virginia up into New York tomorrow. So we'll certainly be watching that potential developments as well. So certainly keeping an eye on that. Moving on to Grace. Grace clearly, once again, lots of convection going on with this storm. In the center, located with that northernmost bubble of deep convection, that white there, just off the north coast of Jamaica, is where Tropical Storm Grace is located right now. Winds up to 50. As I mentioned, those tropical storm warnings for Jamaica, southeastern half of Cuba, and the Cayman Islands. We're, of course, going to be watching those hurricane and tropical storm watches. Haiti should drop their tropical storm watch soon. And that hurricane watch likely going to be upgraded to a warning for the Yucatan Peninsula here in the future. Next partial advisory at 2 and the full advisory at 5 Eastern time. As I mentioned, Grace is located just north of Jamaica now. It's going to be moving continually on that north coast of Jamaica, and then making its way towards the Yucatan Peninsula, as we mentioned. Tropical storm force winds possible there late Wednesday night, and then, of course, over the rest of the Yucatan and then into the Mexican coast Friday night is when we're looking at those tropical storm force winds arriving in Mexico. Additional 2 to 4 isolated 15 for Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Again, 3 to 6 isolated 10 for southern Cuba, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and portions of the Yucatan. We're also storm surge going to be a threat. Storm surge watches and warnings are not issued outside the United States yet, but 2 to 4 feet are predicted for portions of the Yucatan Peninsula. So that is, of course, the big threat at the moment. National Hurricane Center bringing the intensity to hurricane status. Taking a look at the HWRF model, here's Grace making its way hurricane landfall in the Yucatan, and then strengthening significantly before making landfall as a major hurricane in Mexico. Now, this is just one model. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to come true, but given the warm sea surface temperatures in the area, this is certainly a possibility. So we're certainly going to be watching that with Grace. Moving on to the tracks, again, a wide range of options, lots of different landfall points, but general consensus at this point in time is we're probably going to have a hurricane hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and then it's going to drop down to either a weaker hurricane or a strong tropical storm before jumping back up somewhere potentially as high as a Category 2 or 3, but as of now, probably Category 1 most likely before that second Mexican landfall along the western Mexican coast, or eastern Mexican coast. So we're going to continue to watch this very closely. ahn-REE, located south of Bermuda, probably the closest it's going to get right now, 130 miles outside. Winds with ahn-REE are at 50, and so we're certainly going to be watching this storm very closely for Bermudan impacts, but it should remain just off of Bermuda. Of course, bringing surf and a little bit of increased winds, perhaps some rain later on in its life cycle. As we see here, tropical storm force winds at really any time, but not necessarily high chance of that happening. And as a result, of course, that tropical storm watch probably will be in effect through the rest of this week, although probably not upgraded to a warning unless something significantly changes with this storm. Taking a look again at the H-Wharf model this time for Henri. Again, meandering around Bermuda, and then it'll rocket its way back up north, strengthening into a post-tropical cyclone. And again, it could perhaps be a tropical cyclone and a hurricane before becoming post-tropical as it makes its way up to that north side. Of course, it all depends on the shear. If the shear lets off of the storm, it'll strengthen. If it doesn't, it'll remain weak as it heads off to the north. We can see that here. A decent amount of the models at this point do bring it to Cat 1, or at least a strong tropical storm. Nonetheless, Henri is going to maintain much of its strength over the next 5 days, or perhaps slowly increase in it. Taking a look at the icon model, this keeps both Grace and Henri relatively weak. So again, just to give you a different taste of what might happen. Again, I think this model really underrepresents Grace, but perhaps might be a better representation of what may happen with Henri. Again, off of the coast of Africa, we could see a couple lows form, but it's not probably going to make much progress across the Atlantic. As we can see here on the European model, not a whole lot of model support other than, of course, Fred, as we can see there, Henri, as we can see near Bermuda, and Grace, as we can see making its way into Mexico. And again, a couple things off the west coast of Africa, but nothing too crazy at this point in time. So we should remain relatively quiet. Again, Grace is going to pose a concern into the weekend as well as Henri, so we'll continue to have tropical updates every day until then. And so that's the general idea. I'm not sure exactly the timing and the schedule yet, but nonetheless, we'll try to have an update out every day. That's it for now. Chris 6 and Info with our Catholic Media.